Long before the Iron Throne, before the Seven Kingdoms, before Aegon the Conqueror ever dreamed of crossing the narrow sea, there was another civilization that made every kingdom in the known world look small. It was called Old Valyria. People didn't simply call it a city, they called it the heart of an empire, a place where dragons filled the skies every single day, a place where magic wasn't a forgotten legend but part of everyday life. A place so rich, so advanced, and so unbelievably powerful that no army dared challenge it for nearly 5,000 years. When people in Westeros speak about Valyria, they don't do it with pride. They do it with fear. Because every road built with fused black stone, every Valyrian steel sword, every dragon still alive, all trace their origins back to one place, a civilization so magnificent that it seemed unstoppable. Yet today, nothing remains except smoking ruins, cursed seas, and terrifying stories. The strangest part? Nobody truly knows what destroyed it. To understand Old Valyria, we have to travel back thousands of years, long before the Targaryens became kings. At first, the Valyrians weren't rulers. They weren't even important. They were simple shepherds living on a large peninsula surrounded by warm seas and towering mountains. Compared to mighty civilizations like the Giscari Empire to the east, the Valyrians were almost invisible. No grand cities, no famous armies, no powerful kings, just scattered villages raising sheep among the volcanic hills known as the 14 Flames. These weren't ordinary mountains. The 14 Flames were 14 enormous volcanoes, constantly rumbling with fire beneath the earth. Rivers of molten rock occasionally flowed down their slopes, filling the air with smoke and ash. Most people would have avoided such a dangerous place, but the Valyrians stayed, and that decision would change the world forever. According to ancient legends, it was somewhere among these fiery mountains that the Valyrians made the greatest discovery in history: dragons. No one knows exactly how it happened. Some stories claim the dragons were already living deep inside the volcanic caves. Others suggest the Valyrians used forgotten blood magic to tame wild beasts that no one else could control. Whatever the truth may be, one thing is certain. The Valyrians became the first people in recorded history to ride dragons. Everything changed after that. Imagine being a neighboring kingdom and looking toward the horizon to see enormous winged creatures breathing fire across the sky. No castle wall could stop them, no navy could escape them, no army could survive them. For the first time, warfare itself had changed forever. The Valyrians quickly realized they possessed something greater than gold, greater than armies, and greater than any king's crown. They possessed absolute power. Instead of remaining scattered villages, they united into what became known as the Valyrian Freehold. Unlike the kingdoms that surrounded them, the Freehold wasn't ruled by a single emperor. Power belonged to dozens of noble Dragonlord families. The greatest among them became known as the 40 families. Each family possessed dragons. Each competed with the others for wealth, influence, and prestige. Instead of one king sitting on a throne, Valyria was ruled by an elite class whose authority came from dragons themselves. To become a Dragonlord wasn't simply a matter of owning a dragon. The relationship between rider and dragon was incredibly mysterious. Many believed Valyrian blood itself had been altered through powerful magic, allowing only certain bloodlines to form the bond needed to ride dragons. That belief shaped their entire society. The Dragonlord families became obsessed with preserving what they called the purity of their blood. They often married brothers to sisters, uncles to nieces, and cousins to cousins, not because it was common elsewhere, but because they believed mixing their blood with outsiders could weaken their connection to dragons. It was a tradition that later passed to the Targaryens, surviving long after the Doom had destroyed the empire that created it. As the dragons multiplied, so did Valyria's ambitions. They no longer defended their homeland, they conquered. One kingdom after another fell beneath dragonfire. The mighty Giscari Empire, once considered the greatest civilization in the world, fought 5 brutal wars against Valyria. Each time, the Giscari armies returned. Each time, the dragons burned them. Eventually, the legendary city of Gis itself was reduced to ashes. Its massive brick walls melted beneath dragonfire, ending an empire that had stood for thousands of years. It was a warning to everyone else: resist Valyria and disappear from history. As victory followed victory, the Valyrian Freehold stopped thinking like a kingdom. It began thinking like the world itself, its borders stretched across continents. From the summer sea to the distant lands of Essos, countless cities paid tribute to the Dragonlords. Wherever their banners appeared, rulers had only two choices: submit or burn, and most chose to kneel, not because they admired Valyria, because they had seen what happened to those who refused. At the center of this vast empire stood old Valyria itself. To people arriving by sea, the city looked almost unreal. Long before its towers came into view, they would see dragons circling high above the skyline like birds, hundreds of them. Young dragons, ancient dragons, dragons so massive that their shadows swallowed entire ships as they passed overhead. The air itself carried the smell of sulfur from the 14 flames. Smoke drifted across the horizon, giving the city an almost otherworldly glow, especially at sunrise and sunset. Then, the buildings came into view. Unlike the castles of Westeros, Valyrian architecture seemed impossible. The city was filled with enormous black towers that rose hundreds of feet into the sky. They weren't built from ordinary stone blocks. Instead, they appeared to have been melted into shape, their surfaces smooth, curved, and seamless. This mysterious material became known as fused black stone. No one after the Doom ever learned how it was made. Some believed dragonfire melted the rock. Others believed it required spells so powerful that the knowledge vanished with Valyria itself. Even centuries later, surviving Valyrian structures remain among the strongest buildings in the world. Their walls have outlasted entire kingdoms. The streets of Old Valyria were equally breathtaking. Wide roads stretched through districts filled with towering palaces, enormous temples, bustling marketplaces, fountains, gardens, and public squares. Merchants from every corner of the known world crowded the city. You could hear dozens of languages spoken in a single marketplace: silks from Yitai, spices from the Jade Sea, gold from distant kingdoms, ivory, gemstones, rare woods, exotic animals. Everything valuable eventually found its way to Valyria. The city wasn't simply wealthy, it was the center of global trade. If something rare existed anywhere in the known world, chances were someone in Valyria already owned it. For ordinary citizens, life could be astonishingly comfortable. The empire's wealth meant food was plentiful, roads were maintained, and trade never seemed to stop. Skilled craftsmen, artists, scholars, and merchants all found opportunities within its walls. But beneath that luxury lay a darker truth. The empire wasn't built by free hands alone. Millions of slaves powered Valyria's economy. Every conquest brought new captives. Entire populations were forced into labor, working farms, mines, workshops, construction projects, and households belonging to the Dragonlord families. The harshest fate awaited those sent beneath the 14 flames. Deep inside the volcanic mountains were mines unlike anything else in the world. There, slaves dug for gold, silver, gemstones, and other precious materials under unbearable heat. The work was deadly. Many never returned. Some legends claim the mines were used for more than mining. Ancient stories whisper that blood magic rituals were performed beneath the volcanoes, that prisoners disappeared into hidden chambers. That screams echoed through tunnels where strange experiments blurred the line between science and sorcery. No one knows how much of those stories is true, but one thing is undeniable. The Valyrians were masters of magic unlike any civilization before or after them. Their greatest achievement wasn't simply taming dragons, it was creating wonders no one has ever managed to recreate. Take Valyrian steel, for example. Even hundreds of years after the Doom, every surviving Valyrian steel sword is considered priceless. The metal is unbelievably light. It never seems to lose its edge. It is stronger than ordinary steel and capable of feats no normal weapon can match. Yet no blacksmith alive knows how to make it. The secret died with Old Valyria. Many meisters believe spells were woven directly into the forging process, combining steel with dragonfire and ancient magic in ways modern craftsmen cannot even understand. To own a Valyrian steel blade wasn't simply to own a weapon. It was to hold a surviving piece of a civilization that had surpassed everything that came after it. And perhaps that is what made Valyria so dangerous. It didn't just possess military power, it possessed knowledge the rest of the world could barely comprehend. Knowledge that made its rulers believe there was nothing left they couldn't control. Nothing, except fate itself. The deeper you looked into Old Valyria, the stranger it became. This wasn't simply an empire built on dragons. It was an empire built on secrets. The Dragonlords didn't see magic as something mysterious or forbidden. To them, it was another tool. Just as a blacksmith shaped iron with fire, the Valyrians believed they could shape the world itself through spells, blood, and flame. Many of their greatest achievements seemed impossible. They forged roads of fused black stone that stretched for thousands of miles across Essos. Unlike ordinary roads, these never cracked, never crumbled, and barely changed after centuries of use. Even today, parts of those roads still exist, surviving long after the empire that built them vanished. Then there were their cities. Valyrian architects created towers so tall they seemed to touch the clouds. Massive bridges crossed rivers with elegant curves that no modern engineer has been able to copy. Their aqueducts carried fresh water across enormous distances, feeding gardens, fountains, and entire neighborhoods. Travelers often described Old Valyria as a place that felt less like a city and more like a dream. At night, the streets glowed with magical lights. Great halls echoed with music from every corner of the known world. Markets stayed open long after sunset, filled with rare treasures collected from lands thousands of miles away. But while merchants and visitors admired the beauty above ground, very few knew what existed beneath it. The 14 Flames were more than volcanoes. They were the beating heart of the empire. Deep beneath those mountains, countless tunnels twisted through rivers of molten rock. Some were ordinary mines, where slaves spent their lives digging for precious metals and gemstones. Others were places no outsider was ever meant to see. Ancient texts hint that the Dragonlords practiced powerful blood magic in hidden chambers below the volcanoes. Animals, prisoners, and perhaps even willing followers were offered in rituals whose true purpose has been lost to history. Some legends claim these rituals strengthened the bond between dragons and their riders. Others suggest they were used to create entirely new forms of magic. The truth disappeared with Valyria itself. But the rumors became so horrifying that even centuries later, sailors refused to speak too loudly about what may still lie beneath the ruins. Despite these dark whispers, life continued normally for much of the population. Children laughed in the streets, merchants bargained over exotic goods, artists painted enormous murals celebrating Dragonlords and their victories. Scholars gathered knowledge from every civilization the empire conquered, filling libraries with scrolls from around the world. To an ordinary citizen living in the capital, it may have felt as though the good times would never end. Because how could they? Who could possibly defeat an empire protected by hundreds of dragons? There were no rivals left. The Rhoynar had been crushed. The Giscari Empire had been destroyed. The great cities of Essos either traded with Valyria or obeyed it. Across the narrow sea, the kingdoms of Westeros were still divided, constantly fighting each other while Valyria watched from afar. Compared to the Freehold, Westeros barely seemed worth conquering. That is exactly why the Targaryens were never among the most powerful Dragonlord families. In fact, they were considered relatively minor nobles. They owned dragons, yes. But compared to the greatest families of Old Valyria, they were far from the top. No one could have imagined that this lesser house would one day become the last surviving Dragonlords in the world. Because at that moment, Old Valyria appeared immortal. Its armies were unbeatable. Its wealth seemed endless. Its dragons ruled the skies. Its magic had no equal. The empire had reached a point where many believed it could never fall. History has seen this pattern before. When civilizations become powerful enough, they often stop asking one very important question: what could destroy us? The Valyrians believed they had mastered fire itself, but beneath their feet, inside the 14 Flames, fire was waiting, patient, silent, and growing stronger with every passing year. The greatest empire the world had ever known was about to face an enemy that could not be burned, because it came from the very heart of the earth itself. For thousands of years, the 14 Flames had been both Valyria's greatest blessing and its greatest danger. The volcanoes gave the empire everything. Their heat helped forge the legendary Valyrian steel. Their depths held unimaginable riches of gold, silver, copper, and precious gems. The Dragonlords believed the mountains were also connected to the magic that allowed dragons to thrive. As long as the 14 Flames burned, so too did the heart of Valyria. But volcanoes are not servants. They cannot be ruled. Some ancient accounts suggest that the Valyrians knew this better than anyone. Powerful mages, sometimes called fire mages or blood mages, were believed to perform rituals meant to keep the volcanoes stable. Whether those stories are true or not, they reveal something important. Even the Dragonlords feared the mountains. And then, everything changed. About 400 years before the events of Game of Thrones, one of the most mysterious disasters in all of fantasy struck without warning. The Doom of Valyria. No one knows the exact day. No one knows the exact cause. What happened next has been pieced together from scattered survivors, ancient records, and frightened sailors who witnessed the aftermath from far away. The earth began to shake, not once, not twice, again and again. Across the Valyrian peninsula, the ground split open as if the world itself had cracked apart. The 14 flames erupted almost at the same time, sending mountains of ash and rivers of molten rock across the land. Entire cities disappeared beneath lava. Towering palaces collapsed into the earth. The beautiful black towers that had stood for centuries shattered under explosions powerful enough to level entire districts. The sky turned black. Ash blocked out the sun. The sea itself began to boil. Some stories claim dragons filled the air, screaming in terror as fire rained from the heavens. Others say many never even made it into the sky before they were buried beneath collapsing mountains. Within hours, the greatest civilization on Earth was dying, and it wasn't just the volcanoes. Survivors spoke of impossible things: walls of fire racing across the land, giant cracks opening beneath people's feet, entire lakes vanishing, strange creatures emerging from smoke. Some accounts even describe magical storms and unnatural lightning, leading many to believe that the doom was more than a natural disaster. Was it simply a chain reaction of volcanic eruptions? Did blood magic finally spiral out of control? Did the countless spells woven into Valyria collapse all at once? Or did the faceless men somehow bring about the destruction by fulfilling a prophecy whispered among slaves? No one can answer for certain. That's what makes the doom so terrifying. Even the masters admit that the truth died with Valyria. When the ash finally settled, the empire was gone. Not weakened, not conquered, gone. Thousands of dragons had vanished. The mighty 40 families had been erased almost overnight. Libraries filled with knowledge that could have changed the world forever were buried beneath ash and stone. The secrets of Valyrian steel, the secrets of fused black stone, the secrets of dragon magic, all lost. Across the known world, kingdoms watched in disbelief. For centuries, they had lived under the shadow of Valyria. Now that shadow had disappeared. It was as if Rome, Constantinople, and every great empire in history had vanished in a single day. The balance of power changed overnight. Free cities that had once answered to Valyria declared themselves independent. Former colonies became nations. Entire kingdoms realized they no longer had to fear dragonlords descending from the sky. But one family had escaped. A relatively minor house named Targaryen had left Valyria 12 years before the Doom, settling on the lonely island fortress of Dragonstone after one of their daughters, Daenerys, experienced terrifying prophetic dreams warning that Valyria would be destroyed. Most people laughed at the warning. 12 years later, no one was laughing. The Targaryens had become the last surviving Dragonlord family in the world, and without even realizing it, they were about to inherit a legacy that would reshape the history of Westeros forever. The Doom destroyed Valyria, but it never truly erased its shadow. Centuries later, the world was still living with its consequences. The Targaryens were now the only known family left with dragons. Their home on Dragonstone suddenly became more than a lonely island fortress. It became the last surviving piece of an empire that had once ruled half the known world. Then came a young lord named Aegon Targaryen. With just 3 dragons, Valyrian, Vhagar, and Meraxes, Aegon did something the mighty Valyrian Freehold had never bothered to do. He conquered Westeros. It's almost unbelievable when you think about it. The greatest empire in history had ignored the 7 kingdoms for thousands of years. Yet one surviving family, armed with only 3 dragons instead of hundreds, united most of the continent in less than 2 years. That victory wasn't just Aegon's achievement. It was the final echo of old Valyria. Every time Balerian's black flames melted castle walls, every time a king bent the knee, every time the Iron Throne grew larger with another defeated sword, the ghost of Valyria was still shaping history. But there was another legacy that proved even harder to escape. Valyrian steel. Even hundreds of years after the Doom, every surviving Valyrian steel weapon became one of the most valuable treasures in the world. Noble houses guarded them for generations. Some families had carried the same sword for centuries, refusing to sell it at any price. Because everyone knew one thing, no one could make another. The knowledge had died with the Dragonlords. The same was true of fused black stone. Across the known world, scattered buildings still stood exactly as the Valyrians had left them. Their walls remained smooth and unbroken, resisting time itself. Meisters studied them, builders admired them. No one could explain how they had been made. It was as if humanity had forgotten an entire branch of science overnight. And then there were the dragons. After the Doom, their numbers slowly declined. By the end of the Targaryen dragon dynasty, they had disappeared from the world altogether. For nearly a century and a half, dragons became nothing more than stories told to children. Until Daenerys Targaryen changed that forever. When her 3 dragons hatched, they weren't simply the return of powerful beasts. They were the return of Valyria's greatest symbol. A reminder that the blood of the Dragonlords had not completely vanished. But what about old Valyria itself? Why doesn't anyone simply rebuild it? The answer is simple. Because almost no one who enters the ruins ever comes back. The Smoking Sea, where the peninsula once stood, is feared by sailors across the world. Strange mists cover the water. The coastline has been twisted beyond recognition. Ancient towers still rise from shattered cliffs, but they are broken, blackened, and silent. Many ships that attempt to explore the ruins disappear without a trace. Those few who return often tell stories that sound more like nightmares than adventures. They speak of dragons twisted into monstrous forms, creatures lurking beneath the water, ghostly lights moving through abandoned streets, and ruins that still seem to whisper with ancient magic. No one knows how much of it is true. Perhaps the Doom left behind curses no one understands. Or perhaps fear has transformed ordinary dangers into legends. Either way, even the bravest explorers think twice before sailing into the Smoking Sea. Because everyone remembers what happened to the last civilization that believed it had mastered fire. Old Valyria was more than an empire. It was the greatest civilization the world had ever seen. A place where dragons filled the skies, magic shaped cities, and knowledge surpassed anything that came after. Its people believed they had become unstoppable. That nothing, not kings, not armies, not even nature itself, could threaten them. History proved otherwise. In a single terrible day, an empire that had stood for thousands of years vanished into ash and flame. Its palaces became ruins. Its dragonlords became legends. Its secrets became mysteries that may never be solved. Yet every time someone speaks the words Valyrian steel, every time the Targaryen name is remembered, every time a dragon spreads its wings across the sky, the world is reminded that the greatest civilization ever to exist didn't simply disappear. It left behind a legacy so powerful that centuries later, no one has ever truly escaped its shadow.